happens when the person you love no longer recognizes you? In this heartfelt episode of CareLab, we're exploring the emotional journey of caring for someone with dementia, the grief, the resilience, and the unexpected moments of connection that make it all matter. If you're supporting a loved one through memory loss, this conversation offers comfort, perspective, and a reminder that you're not alone.
And we're so honored to be able to do this episode together with former Wisconsin Governor Martin J. Schreiber, who's a dedicated and outspoken advocate on Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and caregiving. He is sharing his experiences as a caregiver to his wife and high school sweetheart Elaine at events nationwide. And so we're grateful that he's here with us. He's offering humor, compassion, and words of wisdom. His book, My Two Elaines, Learning, Coping, and Surviving as an Alzheimer's Caregiver, has received widespread praise from the caregiving community and is listed among Caregiving.com's best caregiver books. His extensive public service includes roles as the youngest member of the state Senate, Lieutenant Governor, and the 39th Governor of Wisconsin. A native of Milwaukee, Marty and Elaine have 4 children, 13 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. Governor Schreiber, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my honor to be here, and so thank you for the privilege of being with you. Thank you very much.
Wow, well, those were very kind words. I hope that we live up to them here today and with every episode
exactly.
that we do here on CareLab. Before we get into the serious stuff, talking about you and Elaine and your journey together as a caregiver, and your book, My Two Elaines, we always start with an icebreaker question. And so I wanted to pose a question to both of you today, and I am really interested to hear the answer to this one. And because we're rude, Marty, we're going to make you go first in your answer. So are you ready for the question?
I'm ready.
Okay. So the question is, what is the thing that has changed about you the most as you have, grown throughout your life and gotten older?
I'd say appreciation for life as it is. And my dad told me as a young boy that things may happen that we hate, and we can yell and scream and even revolt, or we can step back and look at what is and focus on how we can make it better. And so going through this journey with Elaine, those many, many years, I think of life and I think about the simplest things that really can bring us joy just by being together and having an opportunity to share a special moment of a beautiful bird or a wonderful flower or a great walk or the singing of a song together. All of those things become so more meaningful.
Yeah, that's so important, I think. And not just for anybody who's caregiving or dealing with Alzheimer's, but just for all of us in general. And that's why my answer is kind of related. And so I know it probably feels like a cop out, like I'm copying. I promise this was my answer before yours, Marty. But over the years, I think I have grown to appreciate what's happening right now more than striving for what's happening in the future, or paying only attention to what happens in the future. Because I remember as a kid, it was always about the next thing, next set of grades, the next graduation from the next thing, getting the next job. It's always like the next thing. And now I feel much more like I want to do those things, and there's always more to come, but appreciate what's happening in the moment too. Otherwise, you don't even get to create those memories. So yeah, that's the thing I try to focus a little bit more on as I've gotten older. Amelia, what about you?
Yeah, thank
So
you.
I think
Just let me interrupt. There's a phrase that says, it ain't no fun arriving if it ain't no fun getting there. And I think
Hey,
what you
exactly.
pointed out was just exactly that, just to take the moments as we live them. Thank you.
well, those are both tough answers to follow. But okay, so I think that probably what's changed the most for me is that as I've gotten older, I've gotten so much more willing to ask for help and to say, I don't know. And those things were both so hard for me for really a lot of my life, to say I don't know, to realize that I didn't have to be the expert or to know everything about everything, and just to simply ask for help, to realize that I couldn't do everything on my own, and that was totally okay, and that life is so much better when we do have help and we work as teams and partners and communities. And I think that for me, like when I made that transition in my own mindset and in my life, it was just such a great weight lifted off of my shoulders, to think that, like, oh, thank goodness, I don't actually have to be responsible for all this. I can get help from other people when I need it. And I think that's been
Yeah.
like the most life-changing change for me so far. But isn't the fun thing about life that we never really stay the same, right? Like we think of ourselves as these static creatures, like that we've arrived and this is where we are and this is where we're always going to be, but like nothing could be further
Mm-hmm.
from the truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you mention asking for help, in with the many caregivers that I have had a chance to meet with, your message is so very, very important. Men particularly don't want to ask for help, and they think it's some kind of bravado to do it on their own. And I think what you're saying when you ask for help, what it really means is you're not giving up. I have
Mm.
seen, particularly male caregivers who who are so distraught, and by God, they're going to beat this disease, and by God, they're going to take care of themselves, and they made this marriage promise and so forth. Well, the fact of the matter is, if we are surrounded by an enemy, and there is absolutely no way of us getting out other than to go for help. To not go for help means you're giving up. To go for help means you are showing courage, you are showing intelligence, you are showing bravery. And so, if we can help more caregivers understand just what you said, the life changing experience when you have the courage and the intellect, the knowledge, the understanding to ask for help. The decency, really, it's the decency to ask for help, because what happens, as you know, when you don't ask for help and you try and do it yourself, you get worn down and you
Yeah.
become maybe useless to your loved one, but sometimes useless to yourself or to your children or to your grandchildren. So anyway, great. Good to be with such wonderful people.
I
I
think
have
on that topic too, go.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, the when you look at it from a overarching view over the whole country, the numbers say that the majority of caregivers tend to be women, because women live longer than men, and because it's the female children that end up taking care of their parents more often than other times. And so I think it's really interesting that you brought up the fact about, like, specifically men being caregivers and having sometimes a barrier to asking for help and maybe getting worn down more. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about how, I mean, you've not been a woman, I'm guessing, so you can't really compare it, but like how you've experienced that, from your perspective, and then also the other men that you've engaged with as being caregivers, and like why it feels meaningful and important.
Well, I sit here and I think one of the things that comes into play regarding asking is asking for help, and that is we cannot beat this Alzheimer's disease head on. 22 years ago, when Elaine was first diagnosed, there was no cure. It can't be prevented. Today, by the way, would be her 85th birthday if still alive. Today, Alzheimer's
Today.
still cannot be cured or prevented. Yeah. And so because it cannot be cured or prevented, we know we can't take this disease head on. But what can we do? What is realizable? Well, what we can do, what is realizable, is help our loved one live their best life possible. And how do we help
Hmm.
them live their best life possible? One of the ways is as caregivers to keep ourselves healthy, to make sure that we don't develop irrational irritability, to make sure that we keep ourselves strong and don't get sick ourselves. And so that's where asking for help comes in, to know that our goal, our realizable goal under the current circumstances, the only realizable goal is to help our loved one live their best life possible. And we can help do that by making sure that we take care of ourselves, but also by asking for help, we help take care of ourselves as well as our loved one live their best life possible.
One of the things, and I think I knew, Brandy, that you were going to say that you were already going to go down the same road that I was going to go down before. But one of the things that I kind of want to, you know, really praise about you writing your story and sharing your story so widely. And of course, you know, Elaine's story as well, because it's really both of your story. You did it together. Is I love that you're doing that as a man, because I think there are way more male caregivers out there in the world than we know and we acknowledge. And
Yeah.
and they deserve to be acknowledged just as much as any, you know, female caregiver um, out there deserves to be acknowledged and understood. And that journey, I think, because of the way that society thinks of care and caregiving and just the different, you know, gender roles that we've traditionally assigned to people, I think that that journey probably does look and feel different for a man. And I could see, you know, obviously I'm not a man. I can't have that kind of personal insight to it, but I can see how that journey would be different for a man based on the kinds of like expectations that we have in our culture of what it means to be a man, right?
Well, if you remember, as we were getting ready for the broadcast discussion, we were talking about the fact that my mother taught me how to iron my trousers when I was like 8 or 9 years old. Well, I carried that with me. And also, what I also saw my mother doing was taking care of my brother and sister when they got sick, of helping them out. I never was involved in that. And, you know, in my era growing up, it was always Elaine would be the main caretaker for the kids and so forth. And well, finally, that's changing where men are getting more involved in that. But you are correct; it is that culture that that keeps men more disabled, so to speak, from taking care of their loved one, and and that's really a shame. But and I think that's what makes it difficult for men, because they sort of have to relearn their life. I was going to say relearn their gender, but I don't know if that's quite as accurate. But we have to relearn our life to be able to do the kinds of things that women have been doing for so many years and taking care of people. So you know that's really. Oh, I should mention, and you may be, I'm sure you're aware of this, but 30% of caregivers uh, allegedly die before their loved one, and
Mm.
that statistic comes about because the difficulty of caregiving, and also because the emotional, you know, and then also the unanticipated grieving and the worry and the concern and the inability, well, not the inability, but the, if I excuse the word, stupidity of a caregiver not taking care of their own self. That's what causes these early deaths.
Yeah, and that's hard too,
These early
because like
deaths.
the reason people are working themselves to the bone is because they care so much for the person. And it's similar to what you were saying earlier. It's like not putting up the, not asking for help and not taking care of yourself is actually giving up, as opposed to, well, I think we package it as, when we think about it, it's like, oh, I'm working hard to the bone. This demonstrates my love and care for my person. But how good is that if you're not here to help them, right? And probably haven't come up with a plan to find someone to be their helper when you're not here, right? Because you don't expect that to happen. You're the one providing the care. And so tell us a little bit about like why you felt it was important to talk about caregiving and tell you and Elaine's story in the form of a book.
Well, first of all, to just piggyback on what you said about the caregiver taking care of themselves, my children actually had an intervention. They sat me down and they said, "Dad, you're going to be dead before Mom if you don't take care of yourself." And so that really was an important experience for me to go through, because as you said, you try and do your best to help your loved one, and no matter how hard you work, because the disease is regressive, it gets worse the next day, and you think you just mastered it yesterday and everything will be hunky-dory, and now all of a sudden your loved one has regressed, and now you have to do the same thing over. And so what did I do wrong? What could I be doing better? If I put in 6 hours, 8 hours is going to be better. If I put in 8 hours, 10 hours is going to be better, so forth and so forth. And then the gradual deterioration of the caregiver. So that leads us into the question of why I wrote the book. What happened was I found out, discovered that if there's one thing worse than Alzheimer's, it's ignorance of the disease, and ignorance
Mm.
of the disease by the medical profession, by caregivers themselves, ignorance of the disease by communities, by churches, by synagogues, by parishes, ignorance of the disease. And it's just, there's just so much misunderstanding of that. And so when Elaine was first diagnosed, I had no idea that one of the best things and most important things I could do was to join Elaine's world. Because as long as I argued with her about it didn't happen on a Saturday, it happened on a Sunday. It wasn't the Smiths, it was the Joneses. Why did you put the car keys in the dishwasher? Why are you asking me the same questions over again, and so forth? And so, because I was ignorant, the Elaine's world was so much more challenged because of me being an irritant, criticizing, asking questions. Why are you doing this? My world was very, very frustrating. And so finally, by understanding the idea of learning to let go of the person who once was so we can embrace this person who now is. So I saw that. But then also I had a friend whose wife had dementia, and he would argue with her and say, "You can't have another blanket. I just gave you another blanket. You can't have another cookie. I told you," and so forth. And I saw that as I better understood this disease, how harmful that is. And I said, "Wait a minute." I said, it would be like if I would have walked a very arduous, difficult trail. And now I'm sitting at the beginning of the trail. I've completed it. And now someone else is going on this trail and this journey. I want to say, look, please sit down for a moment. Just sit next to me and just listen. Just let me share with you a little bit about what I've learned, how important therapeutic fibbing is, for example, how important it is to join the world of the person who now is, how important it is for you to take care of yourself. That's why I wrote the book. I did not want to have other people experience the misery that my wife and I experienced because I was so ignorant of the disease. And I hope it helps. Is that it's My Two Elaines, helping caregivers learn, cope, and survive, and maybe even adding on thrive even. But that's just more of a challenge, isn't it?
I really like how you phrase it as joining her world. When I'm teaching about caring for people with dementia, I'll often refer to it as like, just being in the moment with that person wherever they are. I think that the way you phrase it is better, honestly, just joining that person's world, because the fact is we can't argue with their reality. You can't argue with anyone else's reality. The way that someone experiences the world is their experience of the world. And the more we rail against that, the more everyone digs their heels in, and the more both people are miserable. I think, kind of going back to that idea of caregivers taking care of themselves, when we as caregivers of people with dementia allow ourselves to join that person's world and be in that moment with them, it's a great sense of relief and relaxation and a better experience for both people involved. That's what I have seen and what I have experienced. Is that similar to what your experiences was too when you did join Elaine in her world?
Absolutely. But while you're talking, what comes to my mind, I did a Barnes and Noble book presentation, and we had a discussion, and a lady stood up. Her name was Linda. She was like in her mid 40s. And she said, she said, my dad has Alzheimer's. And she says, one day I'm at work and I get a call from my mother, say, come home quick. Dad's really acting strange. He's really acting very strange. Come home quick. Well, she said she rushed home, and when she walked into her parents' home, she walked, and here her dad was in the living room, and he was going like this. And what he was doing is, in his mind, he was, she walked and said, Dad, what are you doing? Well, he says, I'm fishing. Well, she says, can I fish with you? And he says, sure. She went on to point out that experience, even what they were doing in the living room, acting like they were fishing, that was one of the best experiences she had had with her dad over the course of a long period of time. Well, now what happens is the episode is over. And what is happening is that she's in the process of leaving. Her mother says, what do we ever do if this happens again? And she said, Mom, get in the boat with Dad. And that really hit home for me in understanding what you said, and that is about joining the world of the person who now is. And for caregivers, however, what adds to the challenge, in order to join the world of the person who now is, we have to let go of the person who once was. Oh my gosh, we all know how hard, how very, very difficult that is. But by the same token, let me just mention one thing about joining their world. Elaine asked me once, how are my parents? And I said, well, they're both dead. Well, the shock on her face when she realized she didn't say goodbye, much less attend the funeral, I promised myself I'm never going to put her through that again. And so then what happened that next time she asked me, how are my parents? Oh, I said, Elaine, I said, your mom is doing great. I said, she likes working at church. Your dad likes his sports. And she said, that makes me feel so happy. So, well, that's what I call therapeutic fibbing. Therapeutic fibbing. There's two things about therapeutic fibbing you should know. One of them is I tried it the first year of marriage. It didn't work so good.
It didn't work.
No, it tends not to that early on.
And the second thing about therapeutic fibbing, and not everyone believes me on this, I want to confess and tell you not everyone believes me on this, but I was there actually at Mount Sinai when Moses went up to the mountain and he brought down the 10 Commandments. I helped him bring down those tablets. And in the front of the tablets in Arabic. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead. This is so wonderful. I could listen to you talk.
By the way, if you're ever with Moses, don't call him Mo. He hates it. And so anyway, so I helped Moses carry down those commandments. In the front, as I said, is Arabic Hebrew on the first two tablets. And that made no sense to me. But then I looked behind the tablets, and here written in good American English, therapeutic fibbing is good. Therapeutic fibbing is advisable. Therapeutic fibbing can make life better. And so people who are worried about telling a lie to people with dementia don't have to worry about that, because it's very clear in the 10 Commandments that therapeutic fibbing is good, advisable, helpful, life-changing.
Yep. It's like the idea that as adults, we feel like if I can just educate or make it fun or do something like that, I can rationalize with someone to get them to believe what I believe or think what I think or whatever, right? This is like a fundamental principle that we all use, right? And to try to convince people to do things. But we don't do that with children, right? Like we don't try to convince them that they need to do X, Y, Z. We do lots of other things to, be a part of their world and we do that because we know that their brains aren't as developed as ours are, and they live in a different kind of experience, right? As kids. And so we just accept that. And then as they get older, we give them more as they can handle, because that's a progressive process, right? And then if we could switch our mind frame, which is so hard to do because your person is your person. That's just why the title of your book is so, I think, telling, because Elaine, you're two Elaines, right? And I don't want to speak for you as to why you called it that, but I immediately recognized this because we took care of my grandmother, my mother's mother, as she had Alzheimer's. And I knew her before that. And then when she was living with us, and as it regressed, she was not the same grandmother that I had before, right? And so it takes a lot to accept that. And then when you do accept that, then you can say to yourself, therapeutic fibbing is okay, because we're not trying to get to a place of understanding. We're trying to be a part of their world and have a comfortable existence now until whenever, right? And so that's what the goal is. The goal is not to raise a kid who's really smart and engaged in economics, so they need to know the right things. Your goal is to enjoy the life that you have right now. And so that's why the 11th commandment works out.
Yeah, I am wholeheartedly in support of that 11th commandment. I think that's one of the best stories I've ever heard. I'm definitely going to share this idea of therapeutic fibbing because you're right. And that is kind of one of the main ways that we can join into another person's world and really be able to enjoy that moment with them. I think that, and I would never in any way diminish the devastation that can come along with dementia and the grief that is involved with with a dementia diagnosis and caring for someone with dementia, and also for the person who is personally themselves going through that journey with dementia. I would never ever diminish that, but I do think that what you're sharing here in your story and in all of this, like all these wisdom bombs that you're dropping on us here, is that there are opportunities for beauty and real meaningful connection with this person that you love, even though it might not be the same as it was before. But these opportunities, if we join them there in these moments and we, go fishing with our dads, if we get in the boat, what a wonderful story that was. There are really such wonderful opportunities for joy and beauty and meaningful connection in those moments. And we all can take away really wonderful memories from those experiences.
When you talk about meaningful connection, um, in this I try and share with caregivers and also their families. So I would go for Elaine was in assisted living memory care for numbers of years, and so was having lunch with her one day, and she's starting to cry, and I say, Elaine, why are you crying? Well, she looked at me and she said, I'm beginning to love you more than my husband. Well, I didn't ask her what's wrong with your turkey husband. I didn't do that. But here is what this meant to me as it relates to your point on meaningful connection. I learned that it is not necessary for her to know my name in order for our hearts to touch. And I have seen how devastating it is in people's minds when their loved one can no longer remember their name, whether it's the caregiver or children or grandchildren, just that, oh my God, they can't remember my name and so forth. Well, that's okay because you're looking at hearts touching, and hearts can touch by holding a hand, by giving a hug, by singing songs together, by just being with one another, by sitting and watching the leaves roll across the lawn. All of that is so important to happen. And so what also happens then is, well, I'm not going to go see so and so because I'm not going to visit them because they don't know who I am anyway. Well, that's not true. It could be they don't know your name, but it doesn't mean your heart still can't touch. And that then becomes so meaningful, that giving of comfort. Again, our goal is to help our loved one live their best life possible. And this wonderful authoress said, I may never remember what you said. I may never remember what you did, but I will always remember how you made me feel. And I want people to know that just because they don't know your name, don't become disheartened because you still have that opportunity for hearts to touch.
I think that one of the things that people are sometimes discouraged by, or friends or family who aren't maybe the direct immediate caregiver for someone, will sometimes stop going to see that person who has dementia because they just don't know what to say. They're afraid of trying to have a conversation with that person. And I think we can all relate to that. We've had some experience like that, right? Where we just weren't sure what to say. I bet that you have some wonderful advice and thoughts to give to folks who are maybe listening to this and thinking, well, I haven't seen Aunt Judy in a long time, but I'm just not sure what to say. I don't even know how to approach that situation. What would you tell someone who is having that kind of anxiety?
Well, I'm going to sort of back into it to the answer. Uh, Alzheimer's is not what you call a chicken casserole disease. If hypothetically speaking, I have open heart surgery, people will bring me a chicken casserole recuperating. If I fall and break a hip, people bring me chicken casserole recuperating. If my wife has Alzheimer's, because people are ignorant of this disease, they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do, and so they stay away. And because they stay away, then the caregiver not only is trying to deal with the loss of their loved one as their mind disappears daily, but they're also feeling abandoned and neglected because friends of 25, 30 years, 40 years are no longer coming by. And so one of the best ways to handle all of this is to understand if Alzheimer's is bad, ignorance of the disease is worse, to share with friends what this Alzheimer's is about, and to have them understand that this is a situation where they may not know your name and they come up with other ideas. You still can bring them as a good friend the kind of comfort of making them feel as if your hearts are touching. And so, yes, but I have to also go to this point. Everyone handles grief a different way. So Elaine had two sisters and a brother, and some of them came, and some of them never came, and it gets to the point where I I have to learn that it is not my role, my job to tell someone how to handle grief. And so if someone is truly grieving and they can't really handle the visitation, I have to understand and accept that. But by the same token, not everyone is that way. And if we can help our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, siblings, and so forth better understand this disease and have them know that even though they don't know our name, they still will feel refreshed and comforted by the fact that there is that kind of visitation, that kind of getting together.
Are there some ways that you either had people that participated in your lives together or would have been helpful to you, to kind of give people some concrete examples about ways that they can be continue to be a part of somebody's life, even if they do have Alzheimer's?
Well, I had a niece, I have a niece, but anyway, she knew when I would be there with Elaine at lunchtime, and she would stop by and bring flowers. Well, Elaine would get the sense of the flowers and so forth. I would get the comfort of being acknowledged as a caregiver. I was
Mm.
comforted as being acknowledged as someone who was going through some really tough challenges. And so that's an example of, of someone bringing, being with you at the time of, of just being visiting with your loved one. And my brother Bob and his wife Rose, they were just truly outstanding too, in the fact that they were willing to, uh, be with me and understand and to listen to what I was going through. If people can understand that by visiting, they're not only helping the person who is ill, but they're also helping the caregiver. My brother would want to help out his brother. I would want to help out my brother, my sister, and so forth. And so to know that just because you don't want to go visit the person who is ill doesn't mean you still cannot visit the caregiver and be with them at the time they're with their loved one to make some kind of a more comforting experience for them. But that is what comes to my mind at the moment.
One of the things that I'm seeing that you, I think, have a really unique talent for, in addition to, obviously you're incredibly intelligent, you're very empathetic, you're a wonderful communicator, but I also think you're really good at finding the humor in things. Um, can you talk a little bit about ways that you were able to find kind of humor in your journey, even though sometimes it was hard, and how people can find humor in their own days, even when maybe they're having a tough day caring for someone they love?
Well, first of all, thank you for all the compliments. I wish I could halfway measure up to what you're trying to describe. So thank you for that. Well, this humor, um, we need humor, and when I visit with people and when I have my book discussions, it seems like almost caregivers have to have an excuse to laugh. It seems that caregivers, we're so uptight, rightly so, with what is going on in our lives. We're involved in the emotional loss, and now we're wondering what's going to happen after my loved one dies. How long will my loved one be surviving? What kind of food can I have? What will I have enough money? And so all of that is going on. But then if we can get some kind of momentarily of a laugh, like I said, when Elaine said she's loving me more than her husband, and like I didn't ask what's wrong with your turkey husband, that to me sort of struck me sort of funny, and I had a chance to repeat that to friends, and so on, and to just look for opportunities. So I sometimes tell the story about how I'm with Elaine at lunch, and she gets on this tangent where she it's telling me and everybody around how intelligent and how good looking I am. And so I tell people, well, what happened was that there was a doctor and a nurse at a nearby table, and they heard Elaine tell everybody and tell me how intelligent and how good looking I am. And they said, Elaine is getting better because she knows her husband is intelligent and good looking. And then I go on to point out that they wrote an article for the New England Medical Journal, and the New England Medical Journal, not being dumb, is they wrote back and they said, you have to show three things where someone is getting better. You only show two: intelligent and good looking. And so a period of time went by, and now Elaine and I are having lunch again. And now she get on one of these tangents. How did we meet? How did we meet? I said, Elaine, when we were freshmen in high school, we sat next to each other in Latin class, and I fell in love with you right away. And I said, I knew I wanted you for my wife. I knew that you were so beautiful and kind and so forth. And I said, not only that, I said that if any boy got within 50 feet of you, I bopped him on the head. Well, she looked at me and she said, you're a bullshitter. Well, now they have the three things, okay? And so you can look for a New England Medical Journal article around October, November, where they say Elaine Schreiber had gotten better because she knew her husband had these three attributes. And so, but humor ends up becoming so important, and I try to incorporate that as much as I can. One maybe sharing a situation with you, I point out that this disease takes us to places we never thought we would be. Did I ever think I would be able to be on a show as quality of what you have, and to be talking with people like I am talking with you and so forth? Never, never. And so I use the example of, I was elected to the state Senate back in 1962, and I was a member of the state Senate Education Committee. Well, one of my job's responsibilities was to go to Washington, D.C. for a meeting. And if you take a 5:30 in the morning airplane out of Milwaukee, and you can go to Washington, D.C., have your meeting, and come back the same day, which I was in the process of doing. And so it's 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're boarding the airplane. Now, this is going to make sense as you look at the geography of the United States. If you take off in Milwaukee, you're going to fly over Detroit and so forth. But anyway, and then almost a straight line between Milwaukee, Detroit. But anyway, so this gentleman is ahead of me getting on the airplane in Milwaukee, and he said, does this plane stop in Detroit? And the flight attendant said, yes, it does, sir. Well, he says, I have to get off in Detroit. She said, fine. No, he said, I have to get off in Detroit because I've got an important. She says, yes, sir. No, he says, look at it. I'm inclined to fall asleep. If I fall asleep, I'm going to miss getting off, and I'm going to miss a very important meeting. Will you get me on? Yes. Do you promise you will get? Sir, I promise I'll get you off of this airplane in Detroit. Well, now we land in Washington, D.C., and this gentleman, and then distinguished as he was and so forth, as he gets off of the airplane in Washington, D.C., he berates the flight attendant like I've never seen anyone berated before in my whole. I felt sorry for the flight attendant, and after he had left, I walked up to her and I said, "Oh my gosh," I said, "that man was angry. He was so angry." And she said, "He was angry. You should have seen the fellow I put off in Detroit." So anyway, so it's humor. It's trying. It's a open. I think it's an opening of the heart, a refreshment of the existence. Just to have that kind of a, oh, I don't know, the soothing kind of effect. And I try and as much as possible as I visit, to give people an excuse to laugh and to try and have as quality life as they can have too.
Well, Marty, we really appreciate you coming on CareLab and sharing your story. Where can people find the book at so that they can read it for themselves?
Well, first of all, thanks for asking. We have a website, My Two Elaines, all one word, my2elaines.com. And so that would be one of the places. But I know that our area, Barnes and Noble, has them, and I don't know. I think probably through Amazon and so forth. But and then also, please let everyone know that this is a mission for me, and if anyone needs or would like a talk, a visitor, I don't charge. I ask maybe that they buy a couple books, but I don't charge. And if there would happen to be a situation where there is a profit from the sale of books, it goes to support caregiver support groups and so on. But my2elaines.com, that also has sort of the schedule of where I'm supposed to be next. I'm scheduled to be down in Mississippi for a bit, up in Minneapolis for a bit, and so forth. But no, I'm glad. I would be so honored to share my book. One thing that I want you to know about the book is that I wrote the book and I thought I had told my story. And lo and behold, maybe 3 weeks before going to print, I find a series of notes and journals and diaries that Elaine had been keeping since her diagnosis. I went through those notes and diaries with my two daughters, Kathy and Christine, and we picked out notes from her diary that I used to begin each chapter with. And what that does is when the reader looks at that, they get a first-hand insight into what goes on in the mind of a person who is diagnosed with this disease and has to continue forward. And I think if people read that, they're going to get a much greater understanding as to how important they are in their loved one's life, and also a better understanding how important it is to join their world. And that's just by the notes in front of each chapter. And so it's been a wonderful thing to be able to think that am able to help people along on this journey. And it means the world to me, and it means the world to me that I could be on your program with you and to share this kind of discussion. It's just outstanding. Thank you.
Well, Governor Martin Schreiber, thank you so much for being here. Y'all, if you are looking for his book, My Two Elaines, or you want to know more about where he's speaking, the link to my2elaines.com is going to be included in the show notes for this episode. So you can just look down there and you can click right on that link and find it straight from there. If you enjoyed this episode, if you made it all to the end, and I hope that you did, then please make sure that you are liking, subscribing. Please leave a review and a comment. That is one of the ways that it makes it easier for other caregivers to find CareLab and get access to the information and resources that we share. Thank you so much for listening. Governor Schreiber, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate you, and we will see you all or hear you all next time right here on CareLab.
Bye.